Welcome back to Chips and Salsa, where we talk about security at Intel. I'm Jerry.
I am CRob.
Today, our guest is Josh Dembling, who runs Intel's Product Security Incident Response Team, or PSIRT. And he's going to talk with us about how his team manages relationships with external security researchers, manages vulnerability reports, and works to set internal policies to help ensure the triage mitigation process is as efficient as possible.
I am very pleased to have friend of the show, Josh Dembling here. Josh, could you tell us about yourself and kind of what you do here at Intel?
I have been in tech for a little over 30 years, worked at a series of different companies, from hardware to software. But at Intel, I run the product security response team, which is responsible for PSIRT, which is managing security vulnerabilities through a specific process to ensure they get handled properly. And I also run the bug bounty program and the security working artifacts team, which helps to give us headlights into emerging industry trends and legislation regulations that might require us to change our processes or meet customer needs more effectively.
Very nice.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think we've all kind of worked in the tech industry for a while together.
Yes, that's true.
Co-authors of the first PSIRT services framework. So speaking specifically about PSIRT, what are the primary functions of Intel's PSIRT?
Intel's PSIRT is more like an ecosystem. We not only on a day-to-day basis take in security vulnerabilities and again manage them through a specific process to ensure we perform all the due diligence that's required with respect to security vulnerabilities that are encountered in shipped products. But we also look to capture learnings from that experience and feed that back into the development ecosystem at Intel. In addition to that, we act as champions for both customers, security researchers, and our engineering teams in ensuring that what we disclose and when we disclose vulnerabilities is, again, meeting expectations of all stakeholders. And we also build relationships with industry partners. And as CRob and Jerry mentioned, that we work together on the PSIRT services framework under first.org. We get involved in other industry groups like MITRE, and even work closely with government agencies and even our competitors to try to build a better ecosystem for our customers and the broader the broader technology base.
So, Josh, I know a big part of your team's work is collaborating with outside and external researchers. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what your team's goals are when they're working with these external folks?
With security researchers, we view them as a valuable partner in building more secure products. And our goal is to build better relationships with them, to ensure that we're listening, that we take what reports they give us and are handling it in a diligent manner to make sure that we don't overlook something. And again, to help change and better the ecosystem through the hard work that the security researchers put in, often on spec, on finding security vulnerabilities and taking the time to report it to us. Mm-hmm. So we try to be transparent. We try to ensure that they feel a part of the process, that they understand the process when they're not familiar with it or when they're new. And we want, again, to build a connection with them even outside of the regular process that we have in security conferences, by attending security conferences, or even in some cases helping to organize security conferences so we can meet them face to face, shake their hand, and help them understand that we're here to build a partnership and a relationship with them because we value the work that they do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think you guys are doing a good job there, because a lot of the security researchers we've talked to, including some we've interviewed for this show, have high praise for their interactions with Intel and the level of collaboration. So that's good to hear.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
Let's shift focus a little bit. Can you describe, the vulnerability management process?
We have three main phases to our process, and I think you might have talked about these on other parts of your show, but the big picture is we identify security vulnerabilities, we then mitigate or address them, and then we disclose them. But there's a lot more nuances to handling a security vulnerability than just those three big block items, because every security vulnerability is different. Every set of stakeholders, every product that it's impacting is different. So we take in security vulnerabilities through our intake process, and we evaluate the report that came in to make sure that we have enough information to then eventually triage the vulnerability. This is a very important part of the process, getting it right. Is this a security vulnerability? Does it affect Intel's product the way it's stated? And at that point, we should be looking beyond just what was reported, looking at the tangential issues that might be present. And this is a point where we communicate heavily with the security researchers if we have questions, if we don't fully understand the report, or we have more details that we need. So during that phase, we're looking to make sure that we have a good understanding of the vulnerability and we make a good assessment of the vulnerability. Once we triage a vulnerability, we move into mitigation planning. And this is where we identify all the versions of a particular product and all consuming products that are affected by that vulnerability. And we engage the engineering teams to identify plans for mitigation strategies as well as the disclosure timelines. Once we lock in our plans, we move on to mitigation execution. And this is where we expect the engineering teams, and we work with and monitor the engineering teams in their development of the mitigations themselves. Once the mitigations are finalized, the next step is disclosure. And this is where we work very closely with you all on disclosing a technical advisory under NDA to all of our customers, and then a security advisory that goes public at some point later on in the cycle. And after that, I have one other part to this. After we've closed the ticket, we collect all the information in our dashboards and feed that back into both the SDL processes and back to the development teams. And we have ways to look at common trends and demographics of the vulnerabilities over time. So we monitor not only the kinds of security vulnerabilities we see, but even the attack vectors and also how well we handled the process. We look to drive improvements in our performance along the way. Again, not every security vulnerability is handled in the same way. And sometimes there are nuances to them that cause us to have to spend more time in certain areas of the process. But we want to examine that to find trends where we can drive improvements in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we mentioned it a couple times before, but I know that our PSIRT is generally based on that first.org PSIRT services framework that, again, we all were part of. And, what's cool about that is that it was written by a bunch of us in the industry who
Mm-hmm.
work in PSIRT. So for folks who don't know about that or are thinking about starting a PSIRT, we'll put a link to that down below. But yeah, thanks for that insight.
And that's such a great point too, because it really takes the ecosystem to refine this and get it right, to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of customers, but we're doing it collaboratively, even when we have competitors that we're working with. And so the PSIRT services framework was a great example of, we were all worked for different companies at the time that we wrote that. And now we've all evolved, but those same people still come together every few weeks, and we talk about emerging issues, emerging challenges. We get engaged in new industry groups or to deal with new challenges or changes to the way that either the government or our customers are expecting us to handle and disclose security vulnerabilities. So that's such a critical piece to this puzzle of handling security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, that companies are following a similar, guideline like the services framework, for these multi-vendor coordinated disclosures that happen fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about the researchers a second ago, and And I know that you've talked to others on my team about the bug bounty program, but we've tried to do the same thing with the bug bounty program. We've helped to spearhead the bug bounty community of interest that brings together the industry to try to homogenize and normalize the experience of reporting vulnerabilities and handling vulnerabilities from external sources, so that it's something that's a little bit more comfortable for the security researchers, and it also meets more of the customer expectations. So
Yeah, I like that. Just another
Yeah.
way Intel's involved in helping to standardize things in the security industry.
right, yeah.
Yeah, both very worthy efforts. And so you just got done talking a lot about the PSIRT's process, and it's awesome that we have this kind of rigor and discipline around how we do our work that's informed by this ecosystem kind of body of framework. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about another aspect for PSIRTs? Talk about your internal policies and maybe why these are important for our business and the operation of the PSIRT.
That's a really great question. Policies are all about setting expectations. What
Mhm.
is expected of the business and the engineering groups when it comes to dealing with security vulnerabilities? And PSIRT sets, I'll say they're very simple policies, but they're very effective. We set a policy that ensures all security vulnerabilities that are identified in supported Intel products are reported to PSIRT. That way, we can help to ensure there's a common way that these vulnerabilities are handled. And we make sure that it's following, again, the industry practices or the common industry practices, as well as meeting the expectations of the customers. The other policy that we have is around mitigation. There's requirements to mitigate security vulnerabilities, or at least to address them in certain ways based on this policy. We point back to our processes to help set target timelines for us to respond to security vulnerabilities, knowing that there is a need for some adjustments in those timelines depending on the nature of a security vulnerability. But again, the policy helps to set the expectation that these need to be handled with with a degree of urgency. And then the third policy we have is really around disclosure, that all security vulnerabilities are disclosed through our process. Again, so that there's a common practice that and a common theme to the way we disclose security vulnerabilities, and we can ensure we're meeting again the expectations of customers. And this is, where we work with you very closely to ensure that we're also aligning with new industry trends, like eventually more automated disclosures
Woohoo!
and the expectation of VEX.
Oh, we look forward to coming having you back on the show to talk about CSAF and VEX in
Oh
the
yeah,
coming months.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all great info. Thanks, Josh. What anything coming up for PSIRT in the near term? I mean, you mentioned bug bounty before. We talked with Katie and Chris from your team about bug bounty and Project Circuit Breaker. Uh, what do you have a couple words you want to say about Project Circuit Breaker? Because this was a kind of an innovative new program, and we've interviewed some of the researchers who've
Mhm.
participated in it, and everybody just seems so excited about
Loved it.
the interaction between researchers and Intel engineers. What
Yeah.
led to Project Circuit Breaker?
So there's two parts to our bug bounty program. One part is more common and standard in that we have a set of products that are considered to be in scope, and security vulnerabilities get reported by security researchers that do research on products in their own timeline in their own way. Project Circuit Breaker was created to amplify our attempt to build relationships with the security researchers and also gain insight from them on very specific technologies. So we create campaigns around a specific product or technology type, sometimes pre-release, sometimes post-release, but we do it with a considerable rigor, where we spend time training, teaching the security researchers about the technology. We get them connected with engineers and architects that have developed the technology, and we have specific timelines as well as rewards that go along with participating in the program. they're private programs, which is a little different than what we do with the normal bug bounty program, which is open to anybody. These are typically by invite only because we look for very specific skill sets and security researchers to participate in this. But it garners a lot of good information for us about our products to ensure that when we're releasing a product, it's, again, going to meet the higher expectations that the industry has around our technology and with respect to security.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and with that, Josh, we want to thank you and all of your team's efforts for everything they do around the product security and assurance activities that kind of help lay the foundation for Intel security. Thank you for your time today and joining in with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be on.
Oh, it was great to catch up with Josh and hear about all of our interesting Intel PSIRT processes and policies and how they engage with the external researcher community, and also how our program is informed and also helps shape the industry ecosystem around this type of thing with the PSIRT services framework.
Yep, it was great to catch up with Josh, like you said, and I think that's it for this episode of Chips and Salsa. Thanks for watching. It's easier if I don't try to add too much bullshit.